Marcus hated the sound of his wife's chewing. He sat across from Diane at the dinner table, watching as she took another bite of buttery garlic bread, sauce dripping onto her plate. The sound of her lips smacking together sent a shiver down his spine, not the kind of shiver that came from love, but from disgust. He used to adore her. Once upon a time, she was the most beautiful woman in the world to him. Slim, sexy, full of life. He used to show her off. But that was 15 years ago. Now, she was different. She had gained too much weight. Her face was fuller, her arms thicker, her stomach no longer flat. She didn't wear makeup anymore. She lived in baggy shirts and sweatpants, as if she had given up on life and on being attractive to him. Marcus could barely stand looking at her. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to eat. Every bite felt like swallowing regret. "You're quiet tonight," Diane said, smiling softly. Marcus glanced at her, gripping his fork. How could she still look at him like that? Like he was the best thing in her world. Didn't she notice the way he barely touched her? The way he stopped saying "I love you" months ago? He took a sip of his wine, his heart pounding. "This is it," he told himself. "Tonight is the night I finally leave her." Diane took another bite, chewing happily, completely unaware that this was their last supper together. Marcus zipped up his suitcase, his hands shaking with a mix of nerves and excitement. The moment had finally come. No more guilt. No more pretending. No more waking up next to a woman he no longer desired. Diane stood in the doorway, staring at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. "You're really doing this?" she whispered. It wasn't a question. Marcus couldn't look at her. He focused on his suitcase, the door, the freedom waiting for him outside. "I have to," he muttered. "I can't stay here." Diane let out a shaky breath, hugging herself. "Where are you going?" "To Sabrina's." She winced at the name. "So, you've been planning this," she said softly. Marcus didn't answer. His silence said enough. Diane wiped at her eyes. "I would have lost weight if that's what you wanted. I would have tried harder." Marcus sighed. "It's not just about that." She swallowed. "Then what is it about, Marcus?" 15 years. We built a life together. Her voice broke, and she shook her head. "I guess I just never thought you'd throw it all away for a younger woman with a nice body." Marcus clenched his jaw. Why was she making him the villain? He had needs. A man deserved to be with someone who made him feel alive, who made him feel wanted. "Diane," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "this isn't about you." She let out a bitter laugh. "Really? Because it sure feels like it is." Marcus exhaled, rolling his suitcase past her. "Goodbye, Diane." He didn't wait for her response. He walked out of the house and into his new life. Sabrina's apartment smelled like expensive perfume and red wine. She grinned as she opened the door, wearing nothing but a silky red robe that barely covered her curves. "Took you long enough," she purred, pulling him inside. Marcus melted into her touch. This was what he needed. This was what he deserved. Diane would get over it. She had to. While Marcus was out spending money on Sabrina, Diane sat on her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Her face was puffy from crying. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing the same oversized t-shirt she'd slept in. This wasn't who she used to be. She used to love herself. She used to dress up, go out, feel confident. She used to be loved. But Marcus had thrown her away like garbage. All because she wasn't good enough for him anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time, she didn't wipe it away. This time, she let the pain sink in. Then, she took a deep breath and whispered, "No more." She wouldn't let him break her. She wouldn't let him win. Tomorrow, she was changing her life. A new beginning. The gym smelled like sweat and determination. Diane felt out of place as she walked in, tugging at her loose t-shirt. Everyone here looked fit, confident, like they belonged. And then there was her. A middle-aged woman trying to pick up the broken pieces of her life. She swallowed her nerves and stepped onto the treadmill. Her legs burned after just 10 minutes. She was out of breath. She felt like giving up. Until a deep, smooth voice spoke beside her. First time. She turned to see a tall, muscular man in a black gym shirt and fitted shorts. He looked wealthy, powerful, and confident. He smiled. "I'm Jake." She hesitated. "Diane." He nodded at her treadmill. "You're doing great. Keep pushing." Something about his words made her feel lighter. For the first time in months, she smiled. Bonding through pain. Over the next few weeks, Jake became Diane's gym partner. He pushed her, motivated her, made her believe in herself again. One day, after a long workout, Diane sat on the gym bench, panting. Jake handed her a bottle of water. "You're getting stronger." Diane took a sip and sighed. "Strong enough for what?" she muttered. "My husband still left me for someone younger." Jake's face darkened. Diane never talked about Marcus, but today, she couldn't hold it in. "He left me because I gained weight. He made me feel like I wasn't enough." Jake sat beside her. "Then he's an idiot." Diane laughed bitterly. "That doesn't change how I feel." Jake turned to her, his eyes filled with something deeper than sympathy. "You don't need to change for any man, Diane. But if you ever decide to give someone a chance again, make sure it's someone who sees your worth no matter what." Her heart fluttered. She wasn't ready to fall in love again. But Jake made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Marcus sat at the edge of Sabrina's bed, scrolling through his bank app. His jaw tightened. The numbers didn't look good. His savings, which had once been comfortable, were draining fast. Sabrina was expensive. Luxury dinners. Designer handbags. Spa days. Weekend getaways. And she expected him to pay for all of it. At first, he hadn't minded. She was young, beautiful, exciting. But now, something felt off. One evening, Marcus arrived home after a long day of work, exhausted. The apartment was a mess. Dirty dishes stacked in the sink. Clothes tossed on the couch. The smell of old takeout lingered in the air. Sabrina sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. Marcus frowned. "You didn't cook." She blinked at him, confused. "Cook? Marcus, we're not in the 1950s. He rubbed his temples. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying, maybe we could eat at home instead of spending money on restaurants every night." Sabrina rolled her eyes. "That's why we have delivery apps." Marcus bit his tongue. Diane always cooked. She used to make homemade pasta, roasted chicken, and fresh bread. The house always smelled like comfort. Now, he had to pay $50 for a burger and fries just to eat. Sabrina stretched and stood up. "I'm meeting some friends for drinks. You should come." Marcus sighed. "I have work tomorrow." She pouted. "You're no fun." Then she kissed his cheek and left without another word. Marcus sat on the couch, staring at the empty apartment. For the first time, he felt lonely. Meanwhile, Diane was changing. Diane wiped sweat from her forehead, panting. Jake stood beside her, smiling. "You just did a full mile without stopping." Diane grinned. She felt different. Her body was changing. The weight was coming off. But more importantly, she felt strong again. Over the past few weeks, Jake had become more than just a gym partner. He was someone she could talk to. Someone who listened. One day, after a session, Jake leaned against the treadmill, watching her. "So, do you ever think about dating again?" Diane laughed. "I don't know if I'm ready." Jake's eyes softened. "When you are, some man out there is going to be lucky to have you." Diane's cheeks heated. For the first time in a long time, she felt wanted. Marcus's world keeps falling apart. He walked into the living room late at night. Sabrina's phone was on the couch. A notification popped up. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." Marcus's stomach dropped. Last night, she told him she was going out with friends. But this was something else. His hands trembled as he unlocked her phone. Messages. Flirty texts. Plans for another dinner. A photo of her in the dress he bought her, sent to another man. His heart pounded. Sabrina was cheating. And she didn't even bother hiding it. He clenched his jaw, waiting for her to come home. She strolled in past midnight, smiling. "Hey, babe," she purred. Marcus stood up, shoving the phone in her face. "What the hell is this?" She sighed dramatically. "Marcus, are we really doing this?" His eyes darkened. "You lied to me." Sabrina scoffed. "We never said we were exclusive." Marcus's stomach turned. He had left his wife for this. Sabrina folded her arms. "Look, if you can't handle me, maybe you should leave." Marcus froze. She wasn't begging him to stay. She wasn't crying. She didn't care. She never cared. And just like that, he realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Diane's glow-up begins. She stood in front of the mirror, running her hands over her new body. She looked stronger, leaner, beautiful. She slipped into a red dress she hadn't worn in years. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Jake's jaw dropped. "Damn," he murmured. "You look incredible." Diane blushed. "It's just a dress." Jake shook his head. "No, Diane. It's you." She looked at herself one last time, smiling. Marcus had thrown her away. But she was becoming the best version of herself. Marcus sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tight his fingers ached. The glow from the streetlights bathed the parking lot in a dull yellow haze. He had nowhere to go. Just an hour ago, Sabrina had kicked him out. She had laughed in his face when he confronted her about the texts. "Marcus, let's be real. You were fun while it lasted. But you're broke now, and I don't do broke." He had begged, something he never imagined himself doing. But she just smirked, tossed his suitcase at his feet, and slammed the door. Now, he sat in his car, staring at his phone. There was only one place left to go. Diane. His pride burned, but he had no choice. He pressed her number. It rang. Once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. He frowned. That was strange. Diane always answered. He tried again. Still nothing. His heartbeat picked up. What if she was ignoring him? Or worse, what if she had moved on? He shook his head. No. Diane wasn't that type. He turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of the parking lot, and headed toward their house. His house. When Marcus pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The porch light was off. The curtains were gone. A for sale sign stood in the front yard. His stomach dropped. He stumbled out of the car, rushing up to the front door. He knocked. Waited. Silence. His fingers curled into a fist, and he banged harder. Nothing. He stepped back, heart pounding. Diane was gone. He peered through the window. Empty. Completely empty. The house, their home, had been stripped of everything. No furniture. No pictures. No trace that she had ever lived there. Marcus staggered backward. What the hell was happening? He fumbled for his phone and called again. Voicemail. He texted. Message not delivered. His breathing turned shaky. Diane hadn't just moved out. She had erased herself from his life. Like he had never existed. Marcus ran a shaky hand through his hair. She really left. And she didn't want to be found. Marcus checked into a cheap motel. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and regret. The mattress sagged, the wallpaper peeled at the edges. It was a far cry from the beautiful home he once shared with Diane. He lay on the lumpy bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every bad decision that had led him here. Leaving Diane. Spending all his money on Sabrina. Buying things he couldn't afford just to impress her. And worst of all, stealing from his own company. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work with a knot in his stomach. His boss, Mr. Coleman, wasn't smiling. Marcus, come to my office. Now. His pulse spiked. He knew this wasn't good. When he stepped inside, 2 other executives were there. A file sat open on the desk. And his worst nightmare unfolded. Marcus, Mr. Coleman said, coldly. We ran an audit on company expenses. You've been using the corporate credit card for personal purchases. Marcus's stomach dropped. Dinners, designer bags, jewelry, all for Sabrina. His mouth went dry. I can pay it back, he stammered. Coleman leaned forward. You stole. That's embezzlement. Marcus's throat tightened. Please. I made a mistake. Coleman's voice was sharp as a blade. You're fired. Marcus froze. Just like that. No severance. No recommendation. You're lucky we're not pressing charges. Marcus felt his world cave in. His job was gone. His career was over. He walked out of the building, his legs weak. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. But who could he even call? Sabrina was gone. Diane was gone. And now, so was his job. Marcus spent the next week in a downward spiral. His money ran out fast. The cheap motel kicked him out. With nowhere to go, he started sleeping in his car. His stomach ached from hunger. Once, he had everything. Now, he had nothing. For the first time in his life, Marcus did something he never thought he'd do. He begged. Sitting outside a gas station, he lowered his head, hoping no one recognized him. A few people gave him change. Most ignored him. Each day blurred into the next. Cold nights. Empty stomach. Shattered pride. But one thought haunted him most. Diane. She was out there, living her best life. While he was rotting. And there was nothing he could do about it. Diane stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the fabric of her dress. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing baggy clothes to hide herself. The dress was fitted, elegant, and hugged her in all the right places. She turned to the side, admiring her reflection. Her waist was slimmer. Her arms were toned. Her face looked youthful again. She looked beautiful. A warm feeling spread through her chest. She had been working so hard, early mornings at the gym, long walks, healthier meals. And now, the results were undeniable. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Jake stood there, leaning against the frame, his eyes immediately locking onto her. Damn, he murmured, openly staring. Diane blushed. You like it? She asked, twirling slightly. Jake grinned. I love it. But then again, you could wear a trash bag and still look incredible. Diane laughed. Jake always knew how to make her feel special. Jake and Diane spent the afternoon shopping together. She had outgrown her old wardrobe, literally. Her new body deserved new clothes. Every time she stepped out of the dressing room, Jake's reaction made her stomach flutter. That's the one, he said when she tried on a sleek blue dress. She gave him a playful look. You said that about the last 5 outfits. Jake chuckled. I meant it every time. Diane felt light, happy, alive. For the first time in so long, she felt like a woman again. Not someone's ex-wife. Not someone's heartbreak. Just her. Later that evening, Jake glanced at her as they walked through the mall. Let's grab some coffee, he said casually. Diane raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me on a date? Jake smirked. Would you say yes if I was? She rolled her eyes, laughing. Sure, why not? Jake's smile widened. That's how she found herself sitting across from him at a cozy coffee shop, laughing over lattes. Jake told her stories about his childhood, his travels, his business. Diane listened, mesmerized. He was 20 years younger than her, but he wasn't like other young men. He was mature, kind, thoughtful. And the way he looked at her, it made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. As they walked out of the coffee shop, Jake suddenly stopped. Diane turned to him, confused. What is it? She asked. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, looking nervous for the first time. I need to ask you something, he said slowly. Diane's heart skipped a beat. He took a deep breath. Would you ever consider dating me? Diane froze. I know I'm younger than you, he continued quickly. But I don't care about that. I don't care what people think. I just know that whenever I'm with you, I feel something real. And I want to be better for you. I want to be better than your ex-husband. Diane's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't been prepared for this. Jake was so young. She hesitated. Jake, I don't know. He stepped closer, his eyes sincere. I won't rush you, he said gently. Take your time. Heal. Think about it. I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. Diane's chest tightened. Marcus had never been patient. Marcus had never looked at her like this. For the first time, she realized. Maybe she deserved this kind of love. But was she ready? She wasn't sure. So she gave him a small smile and whispered, Okay, we'll see. And for now, that was enough. Diane never thought she would ever feel this happy again. But here she was, living her best life with Jake. It had been weeks since he confessed his feelings, and after much thought, she had finally let herself love again. They moved in together, into a luxurious penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Every morning, she woke up wrapped in his strong arms, waking up to soft kisses and whispered I love yous. This was love. Not forced love. Not love that demanded she change herself. But love that celebrated her exactly as she was. They traveled to Paris, Greece, Dubai. They danced under city lights, ate in the finest restaurants, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. Jake spoiled her, not just with money, but with love, patience, and kindness. For the first time in her life, Diane felt whole. One evening, during a romantic getaway to the Maldives, Jake led Diane to a private beach dinner. The ocean waves crashed gently in the background, and the sky was painted in streaks of pink and orange. They were laughing over dessert when Jake suddenly grew serious. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and got down on one knee. Diane's heart stopped. Jake's voice was soft, steady, full of love. Diane, you are the most amazing woman I've ever met. You changed my life in ways I never imagined. I love you. I want to spend forever with you. Will you marry me? Tears filled Diane's eyes. She had been afraid of love after Marcus. But Jake was everything Marcus wasn't. He was gentle where Marcus was cold. He was patient where Marcus was selfish. He was loyal where Marcus was unfaithful. She smiled through her tears. Yes. Jake slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a deep kiss. The waves crashed around them. It was perfect. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding plans. Shopping for the perfect dress. Booking the perfect venue. Planning the perfect day. Diane was the happiest she had ever been. Until one afternoon, outside the mall, everything came full circle. A face from the past. Diane and Jake were stepping out of a luxury store, her arms full of shopping bags, when she froze. A figure sat on the pavement nearby, head bowed, holding out a small cup. His clothes were dirty, torn at the edges. His beard was overgrown. His hair was unkempt. And then he looked up. Marcus. Diane's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, he didn't even recognize her. His eyes traveled over her slim, elegant frame, her glowing skin, her designer dress. And then, his expression turned to shock. Diane. She took a deep breath, stepping closer. Marcus, she said softly. He swallowed hard. You look amazing. I barely recognized you. Diane tilted her head, studying him. What happened to you? Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Sabrina dumped me. I lost everything. The house, my job, my life. Diane nodded, as if she already knew. I came looking for you, Marcus continued. I went to the house, but you were gone. I tried reaching you, but you disappeared. Diane sighed. That's because I didn't want to be found. Marcus's face fell. I didn't want to stay in that house anymore, she explained. I didn't want anything that reminded me of you. Silence. Then, Marcus did something he never thought he would do. He begged. Diane, his voice cracked. I made a mistake leaving you. I was blind. I miss you. I love you. Please, take me back. Diane felt no anger. No resentment. Just peace. She smiled softly. That's not possible, Marcus. Marcus's lips parted, as if he was about to plead again. But before he could say anything, a strong hand wrapped around Diane's waist. Jake had returned. His sharp, gorgeous features were set in a firm expression as he looked between them. "Darling, who is this?" he asked smoothly. Diane turned to Marcus. "Oh," she said casually. "That's my ex." Marcus stiffened. Jake extended a hand. "Jake. Diane's fiancé." Marcus felt his entire world shatter. He hesitated, then shook Jake's hand. "Nice to meet you," Jake said, but his tone was clear. Marcus was no longer a part of Diane's life. Diane reached into her designer purse and pulled out a few $100 bills. "Here," she said, handing them to Marcus. "Get yourself something to eat. Get a haircut. Change your clothes." Marcus looked at the money in disbelief. And then Diane gave him her final words. "If you ever get back on your feet, if you ever meet another woman who loves you, treat her better than you treated me." Marcus's chest tightened. Diane took Jake's hand, and together, they turned and walked away. But before she disappeared into the crowd, Marcus found his voice. "Diane." She paused, glancing back at him. "I'm happy for you," he said quietly. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. "I know." And with that, she was gone. Marcus sat back down, staring at the money in his hands. He had thrown away a diamond for a rock. And now, he had to live with the weight of his regret.